A massive highlight of the new console generation is seeing great games upgraded on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X via a free update. It can be as simple as adding a 60 frames per second option, as we have with The Last of Us Part 2 or God of War, or even better, a deeper reworking of its visuals, loading times, and features in the vein of Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate. What we have today then is something of an in-between for the next-gen update of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. In the case of PS5, we see a whole new boxed release alongside a separate download from the PSN store to the existing PlayStation 4 edition. On the Xbox side, well, it's a more fluid upgrade all round thanks to smart delivery. Your Xbox One disc and Xbox One install seamlessly update to take advantage of Series X or S hardware. It's a lot more straightforward. The promise? Better textures, improved loading times, frame rates, and all-round image quality. With all this in place then, has the new PS5 and Series X update been worth the wait? Now, a quick refresher on where we are with this. Fallen Order struggled to run perfectly on last-gen consoles around its late 2019 release. It proved a flawed gem, one with incredible production values for sure, beautiful art direction, music, but then also frame rate issues on PS4 and Xbox One machines, plus a high number of visual glitches. And today, well, I've got to say even Xbox One X struggles to run at 30 FPS in spots in its default mode, while its 60 FPS performance mode doesn't go much higher than 50 FPS in typical play. A bit of a shame, but this is the best last-gen consoles can be pushed to with the 60 FPS mode, and all round you're still better off playing at 30. Enter the PS5 and Series X. Having a 60 FPS performance mode on last gen didn't make much sense till the arrival of these new machines, but here it kind of comes together. Simply running the PS4 or Xbox One version lets us tap into their full potential at 60 FPS at last. A huge improvement. We called it Back Compat Plus at the time, since it was really still a native PS4 and Xbox One app with small tweaks to the code to recognise the PS5 and Series X hardware. So on PS5 for example, we have a solid 60 FPS readout by running the older PS4 app, but even here there were limits. The main issue on PS5 was it being stripped of a performance mode toggle, meaning it only runs at 60 FPS at around 1440p. It's typically solid at 60 to be fair, but not perfect. Fast traversal could cause hitches to the frame rate as you run across big areas, and in certain cutscenes I notice it drops as well. On the Xbox side, the situation was better. Even before this latest patch, Series X offered a performance mode toggle for 60 FPS gameplay at a dynamic range of 1080p to 1440p. Plus of course you have this high resolution 30 FPS mode not on PS5, with a range of 1512p up to 4K. This all stays essentially in place on Series X after the latest patch. In fact, pixel counts of Series X today show each mode hitting the max DRS target a majority of the time, a native 1440p in performance mode and a native 4K for the default at 30 FPS. So good news there. On the flip side, the Series S version notably only has a 60 FPS mode on the new update. So curiously, no high-res 30 FPS option. Still, at 60 FPS, Series S consistently holds at around 1080p in resolution now. So with all that in mind, in truth, the latest update perhaps has the biggest impact on PS5, though all consoles benefit. Till this point, PS5 especially missed features by running on the PS4 app, with the performance mode toggle being added back. So that's a 4K 30 mode by default and also a 1440p 60 performance mode, but with DRS possible on each just like Series X. On top of that, we have key improvements to loading times on each console, visual updates, and improved frame rates in the 60 FPS mode too. So let's look at each in turn, kicking off with a loading time test. Using PS5 hardware as an example in this case, we have a PS5 running on both sides of this comparison. It takes 16 seconds on the PS5 native app on the right side to load into the Kashyyyk area, versus a 32-second wait on the PS4 app via Back Compat, a whopping 50% saving. Given respawning to set points on a planet plays a huge part in the challenge, having the weight chopped in half on PS5 is a big win. And I can confirm that running the same test between PS5 and Series X, it's a similar gain for the Xbox side, with Series X coming in just a second later. In terms of visual upgrades, the improvement is broadly speaking quite subtle. So for example, take the Xbox One X rendering of the game in its default 4K 30 mode against the same mode on Series X. It's a comparison across generations that reveals texture upgrades and also shadow boosts too. In most areas, it's practically identical across both generations, but look close in this scene with BD1. The floor texture is visibly updated on Series X here. It takes a real close-up to catch, but so it goes across the game. Many surfaces use the same resolution asset, but select points do get a boost. Likewise, shadows are pushed up a preset with the PS5 and Series X release. To demonstrate this, we have PS4 Pro code on left here versus PS5, and in this case, across the Stormtrooper's torso, we have a sharper outline to shade on PS5. Again, a very subtle update, but one that reveals work has been done to squeeze a bit more from the hardware. Textures and shadows then, both improved to minor degrees, while the rest of the package is preserved. Loading times are vastly improved and visuals are slightly better then. Looking to performance testing next, we have PS5 in the spotlight, being the release that most benefits. Now, the newly reinstated 4K 30fps mode runs pretty much perfectly all the way through. We get occasional hitches, as on the PS4 app, in cutscenes and occasional gameplay as well. The same applies to Series X, and it's a bit of a nuisance honestly. They're not exactly typical frame rate drops you'd see from overworking the GPU, but possibly to do with background data streaming. Still, the point stands, it runs at a solid 30 the rest of the time with little issue. Either way, it's a big upgrade for PS5 having a 4K 30 option by default to enjoy the best image possible. Switching to the performance mode on PS5 poses a question. Does it improve on the hitches while running around demanding areas, or the low frame rate in certain cutscenes? Running the PS4 version on PS5 via backcompat, it was so close to perfect but had these visible drops. And well, I'm glad to say the native PS5 app is an improvement, though still not 100% polished. Let's take this side by side as an example. Cutscenes clearly push the GPU side too hard on PS5 using the PS4 app, with drops into the low 50fps region. The good news is the optimized PS5 release on right clears this scene at a near faultless 60fps. So it goes for the entirety of the cutscene. There's a satisfying margin of improvement. Next up, we have drops relating to world streaming. Now, sadly, this really hasn't been fixed even on the PS5 native app. Running on the top side of this Bogano area, the same hitch occurs at the exact same moment, right down to 50fps for a split second. It's not a game breaker, but really, I'd hoped background processing could be streamlined for the full PS5 release. You'll still bump into these sudden, brief drops while out of combat, just running planets at speed, always at the exact same points as new parts of a level stream in. Curiously, in this case on Kashyyyk, the drop isn't as severe on PS5, and better still, the combat that follows also runs much better. The PS5 native app clears this fight with stormtroopers and giant spiders with barely a blip, unlike with backcompat playback on the PS4 version. So on the whole, PS5 is better. It's smoother, but do expect rough spots in traversal. Moving over to Xbox Series X then, it's much the same story. The default 4K 30 mode is a lock all the way through the game's early stages. The performance mode at 60fps, on the other hand, suffers from major traversal hitching similar to PS5. There's not much to split the new consoles otherwise. Gameplay runs perfectly at 60fps, as do cutscenes. It's just these transitional moments as we slide into a new area that frames suddenly get skipped on Series X. Again, not a huge issue, though it will be a small distraction as you run the game on PS5 and Series X. Everything else is perfect, from combat to the more taxing cockpit area of the Stinger Mantis. A final closing look at the Series S version next. which, as we've mentioned, has just the one mode at 1080p 60 FPS. It's curious to see a 30 FPS mode isn't on show here, but for what it's worth, the 60 FPS optimization is brilliant most of the time. Every planet I've encountered flows at 60, with presumably DRS to help it along at stress points. Traversal streaming is an issue here as with other versions, but there's no persistent issue in one spot at a GPU level. The one glaring exception to this is the Stinger Mantis cockpit. Passing by the hollow table room, you'll notice heavy sustained drops on Series S into the 50s. This is by far the worst spot I've seen. A sign this area is the biggest stressor for even the new machines, though PS5 and Series X have no real issue with it. Final thoughts then. This update to Fallen Order isn't everything it could be in polishing up performance, though PS5 at least improves spots by running on a native app. PS5 also returns the higher resolution 30fps mode for visual purists, while it and Series X benefit from better textures, shadows, and much improved loading times. Now, Fallen Order is receiving updates to this day to address its glitches. Even on the latest patch though, as of this video, I've still had a few big issues. I mean, check this out, an infinite death loop from auto-respawning mid-air. Not much fun. Visual glitches are also still an issue too, surprisingly, even a year on from release. For PS5 and Series X and S owners, it's a positive step forward at least. In fact, I'm hoping the push for next-gen support is spurring the team on to tighten the rest of the game up. There's a lot to enjoy in Fallen Order, and glitches aside, on console it's an excellent time to give it a try. That's all I have for today though. If you did enjoy this look at Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, feel free to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to get notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch with myself or the rest of the team, you can use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.